So we got about a 2x4 size piece of material here. This is the North 49 mini hatchet. This is the upper size of a piece of wood that I'd want to process comfortably with this little hatchet. As you can see, it can't match the Fiskars. That's because it simply doesn't have the power. It's lighter, but more significantly it has a much shorter handle, so you just can't get the speed on the swing. And I'm having to grip far back on the handle because up here it's just too neutrally balanced. The problem is, when you grip far back, the hatchet moves around a bit more, so I won't be able to run lines as tight with this one as I did with the Fiskars. So you can note it's behind the Fiskars on that. You don't need to do a lot of chops. You can even feel it with just one cut. With the North 49, if I went right up on the handle, you can see it has almost no rotation whatsoever. It's just a straight up and down movement. So I'm having to go back to a 3, and sometimes I slip even to a 2-finger grip to try to get some kind of rotational arc. Because if I don't, I'm losing out on about half of the power I can bring to the actual wood. The problem is, when you choke far back like this, the axe gets a bit wobbly. I'm exaggerating it. It's not that much. But I mean, it's nowhere near as stable as a full grip. So I'm getting a bit more power back here, but I can't run my lines as clean, and I'll stagger off them a bit more with this one than I will with the Fiskars. So I lose a bit more efficiency like this. So again, this is about the largest wood I'd want to comfortably chop with the North 49. The Fiskars will go through this anywhere from about 10 or 15 hits, unless it hits a bad knot, something like that. And this is spruce, so some of it's harder than other pieces. But 10 to 15 will get about 90% of this wood with the Fiskars. The North 49 is up around 15 to 25. It has a bit more of a spread, again because it wobbles a bit more, so I tend to have a bit more variation. But you only need to cut about a couple of pieces with this and a couple of pieces with the Fiskars again to notice that there's a pretty significant difference. And while the Fiskars eats this up rather easily, the North 59 can't bring enough power to it. And this is about the limit. I mean, yeah, you can work with bigger wood, but even on this, it's obvious I'd be wanting to have the Fiskars. And that illustrates one of the bigger problems. You can see I started out here, ended up stepping in, started out here, ended up stepping in, and now I'm down where I've closed in the notch and can't drive through. And that's one of the reasons why this often spikes up to around 25 hits, because now I've got to open this back up again. And again, it's because where I'm holding on the end of the handle, it's very difficult to get the same precision, so you end up with these staggers sometimes. And that's about as clean as I'd possibly expect to get from this. You can see, again, it's stepped just a little bit, and it also tends to scallop or right up like this. This bevel is convex, which will naturally tend to make it scallop if you don't have a really firm grip and a really straight follow through. And that's one of the things you got to be careful with if you're putting a convex bevel on a blade or an axe like this and you don't have absolutely firm control. You can get this to scallop out quite easily. What I got that on for? So what I'm actually going to do is flatten this bevel up here and put a transition or chip relief bevel on top of this that's flat, and then put an edge bevel down here. And this flat bevel will stabilize it in the cut a bit more, plus it'll also make sharpening a bit easier because it'll separate the edge bevel from the transition bevel, which means I can then just sharpen the edge bevel as the axe needs to be sharpened, and then work the transition bevel periodically to keep the edge bevel nice and thin. Whereas right now I'm having to work this entire bevel to sharpen the axe. And again, this is not all clear wood, a little knot there down at the end. No issues, no light reflecting off the edge. This is about 350 chops so far into this class of wood, and no effect on the sharpness. No glinting, no impaction, no chipping. Now we'll move on to some smaller wood. So you can see on wood that's small, that's just a piece of strapping. The Fiskars is actually bringing too much power into it. The wood can't even hold together under the impacts. So all the extra power, the extra heft, the extra length of handle on the Fiskars is all a waste on that type of wood. And you can't swing an axe like this softly because the bit pattern is very thick. And it's designed to keep the axe from wedging in deep penetration. So you have to swing it relatively hard, because if you swing it light, you just won't get very much penetration at all. So while the Fiskars works very well on pieces of wood like this, just your standard spruce 2x4, clears it rapidly and moves through it, you move down to the lighter woods, something like a piece of strapping, and it starts, again, doesn't have the ability to work through it efficiently. You're using a lot more energy and the wood is fracturing and going all over the place. So that's akin to working on smaller saplings. And again, your Fiskars has a lot of power and it's being brought to waste. Now, while the North 49 can't match the number of chops of the Fiskars, you can see there's a lot more to comparing the two axes than the number of chops. Because the North 49 is actually chopping and cutting through the wood. Again, it's staggering, it's difficult to control because of the grip that I'm using. But I'm using a lot less energy with the North 49 to make the cuts. Trying to avoid that nail. Now for comparison, I'll swing the Fiskars as lightly as I just was with the North 49. It's kind of difficult because how heavy it is, but I'll just scale back my power a lot. It's actually worse than the North 49 if I really scale back. And the reason why it's worse than the North 49 if I scale back, again, because the bit on the Fiskars is much thicker. It needs that extra power to drive this bit into the wood. The North 49 doesn't. So what comes out of even a short bit of chopping work, just fooling around for a couple of hours on different sizes and types of scrap wood, is that this axe is much more suited to lighter, faster chops, working on smaller scrub, limbing out branches, say 1 to a couple of inches, working on small saplings and stuff like that. You don't want to be working in really thick softwoods because the bit will bind. You don't want to be working on really hard, really large, dense woods because you have no really ability to get a lot of power to it. And the bit flares out very wide, so on larger woods you're going to get lower penetration anyway. But this is a very nice axe if you do a bit of work. I rounded off all the back here and I rounded off up around this area because I was doing some carving with it. And I'm also going to need to round off the throat down here because I actually irritated my skin a bit, because that's the part of my hand that was underneath the throat and I wasn't paying attention to that. So all this needs to be rounded off underneath that as well to give you a nice comfortable grip. And because this is so thin, it's much more versatile in general than the Fiskars or even the Brock's axe, because you can actually take this into the kitchen, use it like basically a heavy cleaver. You can even use it like an ulu because you can grip right up on it like this. You can do chopping, you can do fine dicing. I've worked on some rabbits and stuff like that, but very nice, very light. You can see it's like neutrally balanced when you hook your fingers in there like that, and working on scrub and that kind of stuff. So this isn't a candidate to replace a Brock's axe. It's a lot cheaper, but it's not like, well, I want a Brock's, I can't get something, I'll get this. Completely different tool. But if you're not looking for primarily a wood hatchet, but more of a utility hatchet that can do a lot more cutting, a lot more skinning, working on meats, working on foods at around camp and stuff like that, this is turning out to be quite nice. And I think one of the things that I might do is take this off, take this rubber handle off, and put a wood handle on it which has about that much more length on it, and then I can grip up around here for light work and then grip right back here when I want to bring a bit more speed and a bit more power into the cut, and that should make it a lot more versatile. And again, I think I'm going to round off all of these edges, even these ones up here, to let me get a really nice full grip up around here like this, and that'll turn into a much more comfortable functional tool. And of course, this doesn't really have a lot of splitting ability. You can see how thin it is, and this is all flat stock. It's not ground here, so it'll wedge in wood really easily.